Ever notice how sharing a space with someone slowly chips away at the idea that you're the only you in the room? At first, it's innocent. An extra coffee mug in the sink, your shampoo mysteriously running out faster than you remember. But then it's your laugh echoing from another room, or your shoes lined up neatly by a door you never opened. Roommates are supposed to be strangers who become friends, or at worst, an awkward story for later. But sometimes the stranger isn't a stranger at all. Sometimes they wear your face, sleep in your bed when you're not home, and smile just like you do when you're pretending everything's fine. Tonight, we've got 4 stories that peel back the drywall on what it really means to live with yourself. So lock your bedroom door, if it even helps, and don't bother checking the mirror. Some reflections don't need glass. This is 4 roommate stories about people who discovered they were living with themselves. Because sometimes the only thing splitting the rent is your sanity. This one still keeps me up at night. This story is called Split Lease. It happened last winter after I moved to Asheville for a job at the local craft brewery. Housing costs there are brutal, so when I found a century-old bungalow with affordable rent, I jumped on it without asking too many questions. The landlord, a nervous guy named Elliot, mentioned I'd be sharing with another tenant. He mostly keeps to himself, Elliot said, fidgeting with his keys. Works nights, sleeps days. You might not see him much. The rent was half what I'd pay elsewhere, so I signed the lease on the spot. The bungalow was exactly what you'd expect from a 1920s craftsman. Weathered hardwood floors that creaked with every step, drafty windows that whistled during storms, and those charming built-in cabinets with glass knobs that never quite closed right. My room was at the front of the house, while my roommate's was at the back, past a narrow hallway that always felt about 10 degrees colder than the rest of the place. I moved in during a snowstorm, hauling my boxes through ankle-deep slush. My roommate, Mark, according to the lease, wasn't home. I left a note introducing myself on the kitchen counter, then spent the evening unpacking. Around midnight, I heard the back door open and close, followed by soft footsteps moving toward the rear bedroom. I poked my head out, hoping to introduce myself, but the hallway was empty. "Hey, I'm Daniel," I called out. "Nice to meet you." No response. The next morning, my note remained untouched, but a used coffee mug sat in the sink, the first sign someone else had been there. This pattern continued for weeks. I'd leave notes, they'd go unanswered. I'd occasionally hear movement in the pre-dawn hours, floorboards creaking, water running, the microwave humming, but never managed to cross paths with my mysterious roommate. One night in early December, I woke suddenly to the distinct feeling of being watched. My room was pitch black except for the dim glow of my alarm clock, 3:17 a.m. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed something peculiar. My closet door, which I always left open, was now closed. I was about to dismiss it when I heard it. My name, whispered softly from somewhere in the darkness. "Daniel." The voice was raspy, as if unused to speaking, yet somehow familiar. I bolted upright. "Hello?" I called, reaching for my phone to use as a flashlight. The room was empty. I checked under the bed, behind the curtains, inside the closet. Nothing. I must have dreamed it, I told myself. The following morning, I noticed my toothbrush was wet when I went to use it. I distinctly remembered leaving it in the cup on the left side of the sink, but now it sat on the right, bristles glistening. I stared at it, unsettled by the thought of someone using my toothbrush. The taste was off, too, metallic and unfamiliar. When I mentioned this to Elliot during rent collection, he seemed oddly evasive. "Mark's lived there a long time," he said, avoiding eye contact. "The place is kind of his, you know. Just try to be accommodating." "I would if I ever saw him," I replied. "Does he have a phone number? Email? Anything?" "He's not big on technology." Elliot pocketed my check quickly. "Just leave him be. It's better that way." By January, the strange occurrences had multiplied. I'd come home to find my laptop moved slightly from where I'd left it. The TV would be on a different channel. Once, I found a hoodie I didn't recognize in my closet, navy blue with a local high school logo. When I held it up, I realized with a chill that it was exactly my size. The coldest night of the winter brought the first major development. A blizzard howled outside, rattling the windows in their frames. The power had been flickering all evening when it finally went out completely around 10 p.m. I lit some candles and was huddled under blankets when I heard the distinct sound of my name again. Not whispered this time, but spoken clearly from the hallway. "Daniel!" I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hall. "Hello? Mark? Is that you?" No response, but the floorboards creaked near my roommate's bedroom door, which stood slightly ajar. In all these months, I'd respected his privacy and never looked inside. Now, heart pounding, I pushed the door open. The room was empty. No furniture, no belongings, nothing but dust-covered floorboards and blank walls. It looked like no one had lived there in years. I stood frozen, trying to process what I was seeing, when a blast of Arctic air hit me from behind. I whirled around, but the hallway was empty. The cold seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, so intense it burned my skin. "What the hell?" I whispered, my breath clouding in front of me. That's when I noticed it, a shadow moving across the wall, cast by nothing. It slid along the baseboard, up the wall, then across the ceiling. A human silhouette that seemed to walk upside down over my head before disappearing into the corner. I bolted back to my room, locked the door, and didn't sleep that night. The next day, I confronted Elliot, demanding answers about my supposed roommate. "There's no one living in that back room," I said. "It's completely empty." Elliot's face went pale. "Did you go in there? You shouldn't have gone in there." "Why? What's going on? Am I living alone or not?" He hesitated, then sighed heavily. "Look, the situation is complicated. The previous tenant, before you, his name was Daniel too. Daniel Mercer." I felt the blood drain from my face. That's my name." "I know," Elliot said quietly. "That's why we rented to you. We thought maybe..." "Maybe what?" "Maybe you were him coming back. You look just like him." I stumbled backward. "What are you talking about? I've never lived here before." "Daniel, the other Daniel, he disappeared about a year ago. Never formally moved out, just vanished. Left all his stuff. We had to clear it out eventually." "So there's no Mark. I've been living alone this whole time." Elliot wouldn't meet my eyes. "Technically, yes." That night, I tore the house apart looking for answers. In the kitchen, I found a drawer that stuck slightly. When I yanked it hard enough, it came completely out of the cabinet, revealing a hidden compartment behind it. Inside was a lease agreement with my name and signature on it, dated 3 years earlier. But I'd never seen this document before, never signed it, yet there was my signature, the slightly angled D, and the way I loop my R, exactly as I write it. Disturbed, I continued searching. In the bathroom, I noticed the mirror hung slightly away from the wall on one side. When I removed it, I found a small key taped to the back. It was old and rusted, but matched the style of the interior door keys. Back in my room, I examined the floorboards more carefully. One section near the bed didn't quite match the others. The grain pattern was slightly off, the boards a fraction of an inch higher. When I pressed on the edge, it lifted slightly. Using a butter knife from the kitchen, I pried up the boards to reveal a crawl space beneath. The smell that rose from it was musty and damp. I shined my flashlight down and saw a leather-bound journal. My hands trembling, I lifted it out. The first shock was the handwriting, unmistakably mine, down to the heavy pressure on downstrokes and the way I dot my I's slightly to the right. But I'd never seen this journal before. The entries began 3 years ago, chronicling mundane details of daily life in the house. Then they grew increasingly paranoid. January 14th, 2020. The cold spots are getting worse. I swear something follows me from room to room. Last night I saw my reflection smile when I wasn't smiling. February 3rd, 2020. Found a photo in my drawer I don't remember taking. It's me standing in the kitchen, but the date stamp says 2017. I've only lived here since 2019. February 28th, 2020. There's someone else here. I hear them at night, walking in the walls. Sometimes I see shadows moving with no source. Today I found my toothbrush wet when I know I hadn't used it. The final entry chilled me to the bone. March 15th, 2020. I understand now. The house doesn't want me to leave. It wants me to stay, to become part of it. There's a space under the floor behind the walls. If I hide there, maybe it will stop hunting me. Maybe I can wait until it finds someone new, someone to take my place. I dropped the journal and scrambled back, my heart hammering against my ribs. As I did, my gaze fell on the mirror across the room. My reflection stared back, but something was wrong. Its movements were delayed by a fraction of a second, as if watching me, and then mimicking. As I watched, frozen in horror, my reflection smiled. I didn't smile back. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted. My breath clouded in front of me as the floorboards began to creak, slow, deliberate steps circling my bed. "Daniel," came the whisper, but this time I recognized the voice. It was mine, but distorted, as if speaking through water. I ran. Out of the room, down the hallway, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove to a motel and checked in with shaking hands. The next day, I returned with a police officer. We searched the house thoroughly, including the crawl space I'd found. The journal was gone. So was the lease in the kitchen drawer. The officer looked at me with thinly veiled skepticism as I tried to explain. "Look," he finally said, "these old houses make all kinds of noises. Stress, lack of sleep. They can play tricks on your mind." I moved out that week, breaking my lease and forfeiting my security deposit. I'm in a sterile apartment complex now with thin walls and fluorescent lighting. It should feel safer, but sometimes when I catch my reflection in windows or mirrors, it hesitates before following my movements. Sometimes my toothbrush is wet in the morning, and sometimes, in the space between sleeping and waking, I hear my name whispered in my own voice. Worst of all, I've started finding pages torn from that journal, tucked into my books, slipped under my door, pages I never read but somehow knew I wrote. The latest one simply says, "You can move out, Daniel, but I'm coming with you. I always do." This one's called "The One in the Mirror Eats First," and it's a story about how something as simple as your own reflection can turn into your worst nightmare. I moved to Minneapolis back in January, which, as anyone who's ever lived there can tell you, is probably the worst possible time to arrive. The winter was brutal. Negative temperatures that made your face hurt within seconds of stepping outside, and that special kind of darkness that seems to last from 4 p.m. until 9 a.m. I found a 2-bedroom apartment near the University of Minnesota campus where I was starting my master's program in biology. My roommate Kyle was a computer science major I met through a housing Facebook group. He seemed normal enough, kept to himself, paid rent on time, and was gone most weekends visiting his girlfriend in Duluth. Our apartment was in one of those older buildings, with creaky hardwood floors and drafty windows. The bathroom was small but functional, with this massive antique mirror above the sink that looked like it belonged in some Victorian mansion rather than our budget apartment. The first few months were uneventful. I settled into my routine of classes, lab work, and the occasional night out. Sleep was becoming a luxury with my course load, and I started developing this weird habit of waking up at 3 a.m. starving, then going back to sleep. It was around mid-March, during midterms week, when I first noticed something off about my reflection. I was brushing my teeth one night, zoning out from exhaustion, when I realized my reflection had started brushing a split second before I did. Just a tiny lag, like when video and audio get slightly out of sync. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and chalked it up to sleep deprivation. After all, I'd been averaging maybe 4 hours a night that week, fueled mostly by Red Bull and desperation. The next morning, I noticed another oddity. The bathroom mirror never fogged up, even after my scalding hot shower. Every other surface was dripping with condensation, the walls, the shower door, even the toilet tank. But that mirror stayed perfectly clear. I mentioned it to Kyle casually over breakfast. "Weird about the mirror, huh? Never fogs up?" He looked at me with a blank expression. "What mirror?" "The bathroom mirror. I took a hot shower and it didn't fog up at all." "Oh," he shrugged, turning back to his cereal. "Never noticed." That's when I started paying more attention to the mirror. It wasn't just the lack of fog. Sometimes I'd catch movement in it that didn't quite match my own. Nothing dramatic, just subtle differences in timing or the angle of my head. Then came the night Kyle was visiting his girlfriend, and I was alone in the apartment. I was brushing my teeth, barely awake after an 18-hour lab session, when I distinctly saw someone else in the mirror brushing their teeth alongside me. I jumped back, heart racing, and the figure in the mirror jumped too, but with a slight delay, like it was reacting to me rather than being my reflection. For a split second, I swore I saw a smile that wasn't mine. The next morning, I woke up with a strange soreness in my shoulder. When I checked in the mirror, I saw what looked like teeth marks, a perfect semicircle of bruises that weren't there the night before. And on my desk, a post-it note in what appeared to be my handwriting: "Next time, don't eat without me." I didn't remember writing it. I didn't remember eating anything after brushing my teeth, and I certainly didn't remember biting myself on the shoulder, which would have been physically impossible anyway. That was the first night I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. with an overwhelming hunger. Not just hunger, a specific craving for meat, raw and bloody. I stumbled to the kitchen and found myself tearing into a package of ground beef I'd bought for dinner, eating it cold and uncooked with my bare hands. I only snapped out of it when I caught my reflection in the microwave door, except I wasn't reflected there, just empty kitchen behind me. I dropped the meat, horrified, and ran to the bathroom to vomit. When I looked in the mirror, my reflection was there again, but with a satisfied smile I wasn't making, and there, at the corner of its mouth, my mouth, was a smear of raw meat. When Kyle returned Sunday night, he commented on how pale I looked. "Dude, you okay? You look like shit." "Just stressed," I muttered, "not sleeping well." "Maybe ease up on the midnight snacks," he said, nodding toward the kitchen. "Heard you rummaging around in there last night." I froze. "What? I thought you were at Megan's all weekend." Kyle frowned. "I came back Saturday night. Megan had that family thing Sunday morning." I hadn't been in the kitchen Saturday night. I was sure of it. I'd fallen asleep early after taking NyQuil for what I thought was a coming cold. That night, I woke up again at 3 a.m., paralyzed in bed. I could see and hear everything, but couldn't move a muscle. And there was something, standing in the doorway of my bedroom. A silhouette that looked exactly like me, down to the University of Minnesota sweatshirt I'd been wearing that day. It stood watching me for what felt like hours, though my alarm clock showed only minutes passing. Then it smiled, a too wide smile with teeth that seemed wrong somehow, and walked toward the kitchen. The next morning, I found something in the bathroom sink, a tooth. Not mine. All of mine were accounted for. It was smaller, more pointed, almost like a canine, but not quite human. Over the next week, I established a routine. I would set up my phone to record my room while I slept. I put a chair against my bedroom door. I started eating enormous dinners, hoping to stave off the 3 a.m. hunger. None of it worked. The recordings showed nothing, but I still woke up with new bite marks occasionally. The chair was always back in its place by morning, and no matter how much I ate before bed, I woke up having apparently raided the fridge in my sleep. Kyle started avoiding me. "You've been acting weird, man," he said one morning. "Talking in your sleep, walking around at night, and the bathroom thing is creeping me out." "What bathroom thing?" I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. "I've seen you in there at night, just standing in front of the mirror, for like an hour sometimes, just staring and whispering." I started locking my bedroom door from the inside and swallowing the key before bed. That night, I woke up as usual at 3 a.m., but couldn't leave the room. I lay in bed, the hunger gnawing at me, feeling like my stomach was eating itself. In the morning, I found the key on my nightstand, not in my system where it should have been, and when I went to brush my teeth, I noticed my toothbrush was already wet, used. That night, I waited until Kyle was asleep and took a hammer to the bathroom mirror. I needed to see what was behind it, but the mirror wouldn't break. The hammer bounced off it like it was hitting rubber, not glass. In frustration, I pressed my palm against the mirror surface. It felt cold, much colder than it should have. And then, God help me, I felt something press back, a hand against mine from the other side, perfectly aligned but moving independently. I yanked my hand away and saw my reflection remain still, hand still pressed against the glass, smiling at me. Then it mouthed words I could somehow hear in my own voice. "I'm so hungry." The next day, Kyle commented on a long scratch down my cheek I hadn't noticed. When I checked, the mirror looked normal again, but when I leaned in close, I noticed something in my reflection's eyes. They were empty somehow, dead-looking. I researched mirror phenomena and found one forum thread about mirrors serving as thin places where entities could cross over if they found a compatible host, usually someone weakened by stress, sleep deprivation, or isolation. That night, I taped a sheet over the bathroom mirror and took sleeping pills. I woke up at 3 a.m. to find myself already in the bathroom, the sheet torn down, standing face to face with my reflection. Except we weren't mirroring each other anymore. It was watching me as I moved. Then I realized I wasn't moving my body. It was moving me, like a puppet. I fled the apartment that night, checked into a Holiday Inn downtown. The hotel bathroom had a mirror too, which I covered with towels. But at 3 a.m., I woke up to find the towels on the floor and my reflection waiting for me, hungry as always. "You can't run from yourself," it said with my mouth. "We share everything now, the hunger, the pain." To prove its point, it bit down hard on its own hand, my hand, and I felt the pain shoot through me as teeth broke my skin. I drove to Kyle's girlfriend's place in Duluth. For 3 blessed nights, I slept without incident. No mirror entity, no 3 a.m. awakenings, no hunger. Then, on the 4th morning, I found a note on the nightstand in my handwriting, "I miss you, come home." And in the bathroom mirror, just for a moment when I first walked in, I saw it waiting, smiling with my face. I've moved out of the apartment now, found a studio across town with no bathroom mirror. I removed it the day I moved in, told the landlord it was for religious reasons. I eat constantly during the day now, trying to stay ahead of the hunger. Sometimes I wake up with food I don't remember eating crusted around my mouth. Sometimes there are new bite marks. Kyle texts occasionally. He says, "There's a weird guy who looks just like me that he sometimes sees entering my old room at night, even though a new tenant has moved in. Says the new tenant is complaining about the same things I did. I still see it sometimes, in windows, in puddles, in the black screen of my phone before it lights up, watching, waiting, hungry. And sometimes when I wake up at 3 a.m., I'm not sure anymore which one I am, the real me, or the thing from the mirror that's slowly taking over. All I know is that one of us is always hungry, and the one in the mirror always eats first." This one is called "Fridge Light Doesn't Lie." I've been sitting on this experience for months now, trying to make sense of it. I'm only sharing it because I need someone else to tell me I'm not losing my mind. I moved to Portland last summer after landing a job at this indie design studio. Housing was brutal, but I found this artist loft with 3 other creatives who seemed chill enough. The rent was surprisingly affordable for the Pearl District, and I should have questioned that more. My room was decent-sized, with a bathroom I only had to share with one other person, and the common areas had this industrial chic vibe that made the whole place feel like an Architectural Digest spread. Everything was normal for the first few weeks. My roommates, Lease, a ceramicist, Marco, a sound engineer, and Jade, who did something with installation art, were busy with their own projects and mostly kept to themselves. I'd come home from the studio, make dinner, maybe watch something on my laptop, and crash. Standard post-college existence. Then I started noticing the food thing. It was subtle at first. I'd buy groceries from New Season's Market on Wednesdays, meal prep on Sundays, and portion everything into these glass containers. But by Tuesday, I'd be missing meals. Not whole containers. That would have been easier to track. Instead, parts of my food would be gone, removed in these perfect geometric patterns. Like someone had used a cookie cutter to take a perfect circle from my lasagna, or cut my roasted vegetables into a precise grid, taking every other square. I confronted my roommates, obviously. Marco laughed it off, said it wasn't him. Elise suggested I was probably just tired and portioning things weirdly. Jade barely looked up from her sketchbook, just shrugged and said she was vegan and wouldn't touch my death meals anyway. I started marking my containers, taking photos of them before bed so I could compare in the morning. The food kept disappearing in those strange, precise patterns. I even found a perfect handprint in the condensation layer on my block of Tillamook cheddar one morning, 5 fingers splayed out like someone had deliberately pressed their hand into it. That's when I noticed our fridge was always humming louder at night. Not the normal refrigerator sound, but this deep, resonant vibration that seemed to intensify after midnight. And every morning, without fail, the door would be slightly ajar, despite no one claiming to have a midnight snack habit. I started having trouble sleeping. I'd lie awake listening to that hum growing louder around 3 a.m., vibrating through the walls of my room. My mouth would go dry, and I'd feel this heaviness in my chest, like someone was sitting on it. But I never got up to check. Until the night I saw someone sleeping in my laundry basket. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom around 2:45 a.m. when I noticed a shape in the wicker basket where I toss my dirty clothes. Something was curled up in there, breathing slowly. Not an animal, a person. They were twisted into this impossible fetal position, limbs bent at angles that didn't seem right. And then I saw it, the small geometric tattoo on their calf, the same tattoo I have on my left leg, an impossible coincidence. I backed away silently, heart hammering against my ribs, and locked myself in the bathroom. When I finally worked up the courage to come out 20 minutes later, the basket was empty, just my clothes, slightly disturbed. The next day, I bought a small security camera on my lunch break, one of those Ring indoor cams that activates with motion. I set it up on the bookshelf across from the fridge, angled so it could catch anyone opening it. I didn't tell my roommates. I just needed to know who was messing with my food, sleeping in my laundry basket. I needed some kind of confirmation I wasn't losing my mind. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, the same. On the third night, I woke up to a notification on my phone at 3:19 a.m. The camera had detected motion. I opened the app with shaking hands. The footage started at 3:17 a.m. The kitchen was dark except for the blue-white glow of the digital clock on the microwave. The fridge stood there, normal, humming. Then the light inside it flickered. Once, twice, 3 times, even though the door was closed. The door swung open on its own. The light inside wasn't the normal yellowish bulb glow. It was darker somehow, a negative space that seemed to absorb the kitchen's ambient light rather than emit any of its own. And then, God, I still can't process what I saw. It was me, walking backward, out of the fridge. Not walking out normally and then reversing, actually moving in reverse, as if someone had taken footage of me walking into the fridge and played it backward. Except I had never done that. I had never climbed into our refrigerator. The me in the footage moved with a jerky, unnatural precision. My head was slightly tilted, eyes open but not blinking. I was wearing the same clothes I had gone to bed in that night, a Powell's Books t-shirt and gray sweatpants. As this backward-moving version of myself emerged, the fridge light flickered in perfect sync with each step. Once fully out, the reverse me stood in front of the open refrigerator for 17 seconds. I counted them while watching, unable to breathe. Then my head turned. Only my head, not my body. A full 180 degrees to face the camera directly. My mouth moved, saying something, but the words were garbled, distorted. I played that section again with the volume maxed out. When I reversed the audio, I could hear my own voice saying, "The light shows what exists between moments." Then the fridge light flickered one final time, and the reverse me walked backward toward my bedroom, movements still jerky and precise. The fridge door swung shut on its own. End of recording. I sat there until sunrise, unable to move, my phone clutched in my hand. I must have watched the footage 50 times, looking for evidence of manipulation or some rational explanation. There was none. The timestamp was continuous. The video didn't jump or glitch. When I finally worked up the courage to check the fridge that morning, I found a perfect cold handprint on every shelf, as if someone with hands identical to mine had methodically pressed against each surface. And my meal-prepped containers, each had a perfect geometric pattern cut out of them, triangles, circles, squares, the food removed with surgical precision. I deleted the footage immediately. Some primal part of my brain screamed that keeping evidence of whatever this was stronger, give it more power in this reality. I unplugged the camera and shoved it in my dresser drawer under a pile of socks. That night, I stayed with a friend, claiming a water leak in my apartment. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself walking backward out of that fridge, mouth-forming words that made no sense when played forward. I returned the next day during daylight hours. My roommates were acting normal, no mention of anything strange. I asked if anyone had been in the kitchen around 3 a.m. a few nights ago. Blank stares all around. Marco joked that the only thing active at that hour was his sleep apnea. That night, I forced myself to stay awake until 3:30 a.m. Nothing happened. The fridge hummed its normal hum. No flickering lights. I checked the kitchen at 4 a.m. and again at 5 a.m. Everything remained in place. But when I opened the fridge the next morning, my food containers were again carved out in those perfect geometric patterns. And worse, I found a single frame of video on my phone that I didn't remember taking. A freeze frame of myself walking in reverse, halfway out of the fridge. The interior behind me, not shelves and food, but a void so black it seemed to absorb the pixels around it. I moved out that weekend, told everyone it was a job relocation, crashed on a friend's couch until I found a studio apartment in Selwood. No roommates, no shared fridge. I bought a mini fridge for my new place, one of those dorm-style ones, without a light inside. It's been 4 months. I still wake up at 3:17 a.m. every night, heart racing, certain I can hear that distinctive hum. Sometimes I find food missing from my mini fridge, but I tell myself it's just me, forgetting what I've eaten. Last week, though, I caught a glimpse of something in my bathroom mirror as I was brushing my teeth before bed. Just for a second, in my peripheral vision, a shape in my shower curtain, curled up impossibly small, breathing slowly. I didn't look directly at it. I rinsed my mouth, wiped my face, and walked calmly out of the bathroom. I slept with my lights on. This morning, I found a perfect handprint in the condensation of my bathroom mirror. 5 fingers splayed out, identical to mine in every way, and written in the steam, backward but legible in the reflection. The light shows what exists between moments. I'm writing this from a hotel on Burnside. I don't know what's happening to me. I don't know if I've always been sharing my existence with something else that looks like me, moves like me in reverse, speaks like me backward. I don't know if it's been stepping out of that space between moments every night at 3:17 a.m. for my entire life, and I just never noticed until Portland. All I know is I'm terrified to open any door now, fridge, closet, cabinet, afraid of what might be curled up inside, wearing my face, waiting to step out when I'm not looking. Afraid that one night it will be me who walks backward into the fridge at 3:17 a.m., never to return to this side of the light. The police won't help. Therapists suggest sleep studies. Friends think I'm working too hard. No one believes me, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't believe me either. But the fridge light doesn't lie, and neither does the timestamp, 3:17 a.m., every single night. This one is called He Winks First. Moving to Savannah in September 2022 was supposed to be my fresh start. After burning out in Atlanta's tech scene, I'd saved enough to freelance full-time and actually enjoy my 20s. The townhouse on Bull Street was perfect, restored 1847 antebellum with heart pine floors and 14-foot ceilings. The rent was steep alone, but manageable split between 2 people. Finding the right roommate proved tricky until Derek responded to my Craigslist ad. His email was professional, came with references, and he worked remotely for a consulting firm. We met at a coffee shop on Broughton Street the next afternoon. I recognized him immediately when he walked in. Not because we'd exchanged photos, but because he looked disturbingly familiar. Same height as me, about 6'1", with the same lean build and dark hair that fell in waves just past his ears. Even his jawline had that same stubborn set that made barbers ask if I wanted something to soften the angles. "You must be Alex," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Derek." We talked for over an hour. Derek was easy conversation, listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions. He'd grown up in Charleston, studied business at USC, worked remotely since before the pandemic made it trendy. No red flags, just a normal guy looking for normal housing. But the resemblance kept nagging at me. Not identical, but unsettling. Like looking at a photograph of yourself from a slightly different angle. "You know," Derek said as we walked to his car, "people are probably going to think we're brothers. We've got that same bone structure. Could be twins in the right light." I laughed it off, but the comment stuck. That evening I found myself studying my bathroom mirror, trying to see what he'd seen. The similarities were definitely there, but felt more pronounced now that someone had pointed them out. Derek moved in the following weekend with minimal fuss. He took the smaller bedroom without complaint, saying he spent most time working anyway. Our first weeks went smoothly. He kept regular hours at the kitchen island, made elaborate dinners with enough for two, stayed quiet despite our shared wall. The townhouse had one quirky feature dominating the narrow hallway between bedrooms, a massive antique mirror stretching floor to ceiling. The previous tenant had left it behind, probably because moving something that size would cost more than replacing it. The silvered glass was slightly tarnished around edges, giving reflections a dreamlike quality. Derek seemed fascinated by it. I'd catch him pausing in the hallway, studying our reflections when we passed each other, always with observations about how much we looked alike. "It's uncanny," he said one October evening, stopping beside me as I headed to my room. In the mirror, we stood side by side, and the resemblance was striking. We could probably fool anyone. Same height, same build, same hair. I nodded absently, more focused on getting to my laptop. But Derek stayed there another minute, studying the mirror with intensity that made me uncomfortable. That's when I started noticing the hallway felt different at night. The temperature drop was subtle, just cooler air that made me shiver, passing the mirror. I assumed it was a draft from a poorly sealed window, but the cold was too localized, too consistent, always in the same spot, right in front of the mirror. The sensation grew stronger over the following weeks. By late October, the hallway felt genuinely frigid after sunset, cold enough to see my breath. I mentioned it to Derek once, but he just shrugged. "Haven't noticed anything, but I'm usually in my room by then anyway." Around the same time, I started noticing small discrepancies in my reflection. Nothing dramatic, tiny delays in movement that made me do double takes. I'd raise my hand, and my reflection would follow a split second behind. Or I'd turn my head, and the mirrored movement seemed slightly out of sync. I blamed fatigue, trick lighting, anything rational. Old mirrors sometimes had imperfections, but the delays were becoming more frequent, and they only happened at night. Derek's comments about our resemblance became daily occurrences. Every hallway encounter, every kitchen interaction, he'd make observations about how we could be twins. The repetition felt less like casual conversation and more like he was trying to convince me of something. "People probably can't tell us apart from a distance," he said one morning over coffee. "Same posture, same way of moving. It's like we're..." He trailed off, but the implication hung there, like we're the same person. I started timing my trips to avoid the mirror entirely, taking longer routes when possible. But Derek always seemed to appear whenever I used the hallway, materializing with that friendly smile and another resemblance comment. The first major incident happened on a Tuesday night in November. I'd been working late, finally shutting my laptop around 2 a.m. The house was dark, Derek's room showing no light under the door. Heading to the bathroom, something in my peripheral vision made me stop. In the hallway mirror, my reflection was standing still, but something felt wrong. The proportions seemed off, like a stretched photograph. I turned to face the mirror directly. My reflection turned with me, but the movement felt delayed by a fraction. More unsettling, my reflection was smiling. Not a big grin, just subtle upturn of lips that I definitely wasn't doing. I touched my mouth to confirm what I felt, watching my reflection do the same. But while my fingers found the expected neutral expression, my reflection's smile remained unchanged. The image flickered once, like poor television reception, then snapped back to normal. My reflection matched my movements again, wearing the same confused expression I felt. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, my smile, wearing my face, but separate from my conscious control. The next morning, Derek greeted me with unusual enthusiasm. "Sleep well?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "I thought I heard you moving around pretty late." Over the following weeks, mirror incidents became more frequent and disturbing. My reflection would move independently when I wasn't looking directly. I'd catch peripheral glimpses of myself standing when I was sitting or facing opposite directions, always wearing that same subtle smile. I started finding small changes around the house I couldn't explain. 2 toothbrushes appeared in my bathroom cup, both showing recent use, though Derek had his own bathroom. When I asked, he seemed genuinely confused. "That's weird," he said, examining the extra brush. "I don't remember putting this here." But the brush was identical to mine, down to brand and color, like someone had specifically bought a duplicate. The hallway carpet began showing wear patterns I didn't remember creating, a path worn between Derek's room and the mirror. When I mentioned it, he looked puzzled. "I don't pace. Must be from whoever lived here before." But the indentations were fresh, too recent to predate our tenancy. I started noticing other synchronicities. Derek and I had begun using the same cologne, though I couldn't remember him wearing it initially. Our speech patterns were converging. I'd catch myself using phrases that sounded more like his cadence than mine. Most unsettling were moments when I'd catch him staring with an expression I couldn't read, not hostile, but intensely focused, like he was memorizing details. When our eyes met, he'd flash that friendly smile and look away, but the studied feeling lingered. The breakthrough came on a Friday night in late November. I'd been waking at random hours with the distinct feeling of being watched. That particular night, I woke around 3 a.m., but kept my eyes closed and listened. Gradually, I became aware of breathing that wasn't mine, someone else's rhythm, slightly out of sync. I cracked one eye open. Derek was standing in my doorway, barely visible in dim light, but he wasn't looking at me directly. His attention was fixed on the hallway mirror. Following his gaze, I felt my blood turn to ice. My reflection was standing in the mirror, clearly visible despite hallway darkness. But I was lying in bed while my reflected self stood upright, hands at sides, wearing that wrong smile. As I watched, frozen, my reflection turned to look directly at Derek. It raised one hand in a small wave. Derek waved back, a subtle acknowledgement like they were sharing a private joke. Then my reflection turned to look directly at me, at the real me lying motionless in bed. Its smile widened, and I watched its lips move, forming words I couldn't hear through static building in my ears. Through the interference, I could make out the word shape. Soon. I blinked reflexively. When my eyes opened, my reflection winked. Not me. I hadn't winked, but my reflection closed one eye in a slow, deliberate gesture while maintaining that predatory smile. Derek vanished from the doorway. My reflection held position for several more seconds before dissolving into normal darkness. I lay paralyzed until dawn, watching the mirror for renewed activity. But Derek was different the next day, more confident. He moved with increased purpose, and when he looked at me, there was something new in his expression, like he'd won some contest I hadn't known we were playing. "You look tired," he said over breakfast, tone carrying more satisfaction than concern. "Rough night?" The next few days passed in exhaustion and mounting paranoia. I found myself taking elaborate routes to avoid the hallway mirror entirely. Derek noticed, of course. "Everything okay?" became his standard greeting. "You seem different lately, more distant." Thursday night, I finally worked up courage to confront the mirror directly. Derek's room was dark. I approached the glass slowly, heart hammering. My reflection appeared normal at first, but gradually small discrepancies emerged. Its breathing was off rhythm. Its blinking didn't match. And there was something in its eyes, a quality of attention that felt alien. "What do you want?" I whispered. My reflection's lips moved immediately, forming words through static buzzing in my ears. Though I couldn't hear the voice, I could read the shape clearly. "Everything." I stepped back, and my reflection stepped forward, somehow closing distance until its face nearly pressed against the inside glass surface. This close, I could see details that weren't right. Eyes too bright, skin with subtle luminous quality that seemed more real than reality. My reflection raised one hand, pressing it against glass from inside. I felt overwhelming compulsion to match the gesture, palm meeting it on the cold surface. The moment we touched, I felt pulling sensation, something trying to draw me forward through the barrier. Static in my head became deafening. I jerked back and stumbled away. When I looked back, my reflection was gone entirely. Derek appeared at his doorway moments later, perfectly alert despite the late hour. "Bad dream?" he asked, but something in his voice sounded almost like my voice with Derek's intonation. I stared at him, cataloging overlooked details. His hair fell exactly like mine. His posture had shifted to match my natural stance. Even his breathing had synchronized with mine. "Yeah," I managed. "Just a dream." He smiled, my smile wearing Derek's face, and disappeared back into his room. I packed that night and checked into a Red Roof Inn on Highway 80, telling Derek I needed to visit family. That was 3 weeks ago, and I've been extending my stay since. I can't go back. Every time I think about that mirror, about Derek, about whatever was happening to my reflection, my hands start shaking. But the phenomena haven't stopped. I still catch glimpses in bathroom mirrors, store windows, any reflective surface. My reflection occasionally lags behind my movements or wears expressions I'm not making. Derek texts regularly with normal roommate updates, but he's started signing messages with my name instead of his, like he's forgotten which one of us is which. Or maybe he knows exactly who he is now, and I'm the one losing track. I find myself testing mirrors compulsively, staring at my reflection and blinking rapidly to see if it keeps up. Sometimes I catch it lagging behind, just a fraction of a second. Sometimes I wink at myself deliberately, a challenge thrown to whatever's on the other side. But it's never me who winks first anymore. Most people think the worst thing a roommate can do is steal your leftovers or forget to pay their share of the Wi-Fi. But tonight, we found out there's something worse. A roommate who doesn't knock, doesn't leave, and knows every thought in your head before you do. You can change the locks, you can swap the lease, but how do you evict the thing that looks just like you? How do you prove to the landlord that you're not the one who's overstayed? So tonight, when you hear a creak in the hallway, or see your own grin flicker behind the bathroom door, don't ask, "Who's there?" Ask, "Who's left?" Because the only thing worse than living alone is realizing you never really did.